Are you sharing it?
Yeah, I'm sharing it. Hello, everyone. So we're going to wait. I just opened up the live just a little bit earlier because this is the first time I've actually done a Zoom to Facebook Live. Elisa, do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Great. Okay, so we won't officially start until 9. So I'll just wait 3 minutes. Okay. Okay, hello everyone. It's really great to be here on the Zoom platform and Facebook Live. So I'm joined today on this call. Okay, hello everyone. I'm joined today on this call by Elita from Jinkies, Bulgaria. And she's going to be helping me. She's going to be looking at all your questions and forwarding them to me. She's also going to be asking me some penetrating questions about the emotional body, because I tend to function better when people ask me questions. My wisdom tends to come out that way. So I decided I'd do an interview format this time with Elita from Jinkies, Bulgaria. So do you want to say hi, Elita? Just say hi.
Yes. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's such a pleasure to be here. You are one of the people that I always love to connect, because there is always so much to learn from you.
Oh.
I'm delighted to hear what you have to share with us today and support the space with having some questions. By the way, I just noticed that we are just streaming in NFT Bulgaria group.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is a way you can share it on your personal page, would be wonderful. If not, we can continue.
Yeah. And I think you can just keep resharing the live with as many people as you want. There's no problem.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. So I want to give a little overview first of what this free webinar is about. I want to give a little overview. So it's really about our early home environment and how we were conditioned by the emotions that we experienced primarily with our mother and father, but also with our family, And I've made some interestingly new discoveries. Many of you know that a lot of times before I'll do a live or I'll do a teaching, I've also been, practicing on myself, experimenting on myself. So I've been doing that recently, and it's been very, very enlightening, very wisdom creating for me. And I really got into this this question of like, where do our habits come from? Because I started to see very clearly that it's not that people don't know what's good for them, that people know inherently what makes them feel good, what makes their heart feel good. Most people know that deep inside, And And that's not the issue for most people. For most issue, it really comes down to, from what I can see, just from looking at my own life, it comes down to changing your habits. Because our habits are really at the root of everything that we decide in our life. If you really think about it, like today I was, coming home, and I often have the habit of eating late at night. That's a habit I've developed ever since I was a young child. Like my mother and father used to give me sweets before bedtime and read me a nice story, and I'd look forward to that every night. And I realized even now at 63, I still expect something, a nice sweet in the evening. And of course, over time, I don't always have sweets in the evening anymore, but that habit is something that's been inside of me for a long, long time. So I thought it would be very interesting using the Gene Keys profile to look at what I call the birth moon, the position of the moon that we're born in, because the moon really represents our habits. It represents also our early environment, the environment that we were brought up in. And how we recognized what nurturing was for us, And this gets into a very interesting dynamic, because oftentimes what's nurturing for us as small children isn't necessarily what we received. Oftentimes our parents are being ruled by their habits, and they're being ruled by their grandparents' habits and so forth. And so one of the things that happens is that we tend to nurture our children in the way that we were nurtured. So if we were brought up in a family, for example, actually it's not that simple. We're either nurtured the way our parents nurtured us, or we go the opposite way, where our parents had such a bad experience with being nurtured that they sort of repress that pain, and they try and do the complete opposite of what their parents did. So this is, and it doesn't really matter, because the influence is still the same. So if you're avoiding something because it doesn't serve you, or you're doing something habitually, it's still the same effect. The key thing, as far as I can see, and this is why I'm holding a webinar next weekend, a whole webinar on this subject, because I think it's a really important subject. And so the key thing to understand here is that these habits that we have developed over time can actually be seen in your astrology chart, specifically in the position of the birth moon. And it's by shifting these habits, by changing these habitual patterns, that we get the most growth in our life. This is my experience with this. The growth actually doesn't come from forcing ourselves to do something. The growth comes from really looking at our habits as objectively as possible. And this is where the Gene Keys come in, and very useful for looking at the Gene Keys profile, because the profile can show you the habits that you were imbibed in your early life, so this is what the course is going to be about next weekend. It's going to be a deep dive into this personality moon and how it influences us at very deep levels. Okay, so that's basically the outline of what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the habitual environment we were born into, and to get conscious of it, to get conscious of the habits that we've taken on. And by using the Gene Key, or even just using simple astrology sign, we can really see some of the habits that need to be changed, through that. And so I'd like to go into that today and talk about it. But before we do that, let's just talk about the emotional body in general. I know Alita had some questions about that. So I think we'll just talk generally about emotions, and then we'll zero in onto the very early home life and the habits that we were brought up in. Okay, so Alita, do you have a burning question for me, or is there a question on the Facebook group? I'm looking at it as well.
Yes, this question, this topic about emotions is really interesting, because to think about the first moments when we remember of being emotional when we were children, when emotion comes, it somehow overpowers our thoughts, everything that there is in our environment. A thought can be very powerful. Yes, it can impact our decisions, or the way it colors our day when we have a specific emotion. So we people are very happy when we have positive emotions, but when there is a negative emotion, it's not really met, especially in our childhood, is not met with so much understanding for most of us. Our parents tends to, you know, seem concerned when if we are expressing some negative emotions, if we are crying, if we are being angry or sad. We are usually asked what's happening, what's or don't worry, you know. So since a very young age, we are somehow being presented with many examples that emotions are not really so welcomed all the time, you know. So we are not, most of us didn't grow up with some really good role models about how to be with our emotions and to accept our emotions. So my question is, can we learn to deal better with our emotions and accept our emotions later in life? And will this information help us in this way,
Yeah.
heal these early impressions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think our emotional body is the cutting edge of our evolution. Okay, it's the cutting edge of our evolution. It's where we grow. It's where we develop wisdom, I would say. And one of the things I want to talk about, I'm really glad you brought up childhood and our parents' reactions to us. So one of the things to remember that all of us, when we were younger, and before we really had any sort of real conscious awareness of our feelings, most of us were masters in the emotional world. We didn't judge them in any way as small children. This is one of the things that I really want to emphasize, is that we didn't actually judge them. We learned how to judge them. Okay, we learned by the very things that you're talking about, by the way that our role models address that within us. So one of the most powerful things you can do, I think, in your life, and again, we'll be covering this in the webinar next weekend, is just to look at the habitual reactions of your parents to your emotional body. You know, if you can remember that, like what was their typical reaction to any sort of emotions, you know? How do they respond? And, you know, and you can look at your parents today and even see that, you know. And when you look at that and see that, you can just take it, don't judge it, just take it as information, as like, oh, that's what I might have learned about my own emotional body. You know, I might have learned to be very stoic. This is what I learned from my mother, was not to show it, was to be stoic. It's like, whatever happens, I can deal with it, you know. What else did I learn from my mother? That love is more important than pain. You know, that was one of the things that I learned from my mother, that the pain you can just deal with, and the love is the most important thing, you know, but denying the pain, you know. And so of course love is the most important thing, but I had to relearn that the pain actually is longing for love. So it's not about being stoic and putting it down, but it's about allowing it to come up inside of us, you know. And so that's what we would have learned in a sort of perfect environment, a perfect early home environment, is that whatever we felt was okay, but we didn't get that message, you know. And so the first thing that we can do to answer your question is just to learn to accept that we have these feelings that we wish we didn't have. Now the reason we wish we didn't have them is something we learned in our family. It's not something that's natural to children, to young children. It's natural for a young child to express itself through its feelings. Okay, it's natural. It's very, very natural. All right.
Yes, I can see in babies, they naturally express their emotions, and we can see it on their faces. We can hear them cry, we can see them laugh. For them, it's very natural. But as we grow, it becomes much more difficult somehow how to express them in a way that doesn't hurt others, but also in a way that we don't hurt ourselves by suppressing them.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, there's a number of keynotes here for your emotional body. Number one is gentleness. Okay. The other one is patience. and the other one is acceptance. So those three keynotes I think are like critical for all of us: acceptance, gentleness, and patience. And probably if you look back at your relationships and if you look back at your family life, those three qualities were probably missing, you know, in my experience. Those qualities, they might have been there, but only when you behaved well.
Yes.
You know, if you behaved well, then of course you got reinforced, you know. So that's another thing that I encourage everyone to look at, is what happened to what were your rewards for behaving well, for being the emotionally good child, you know, like what were the rewards? You know, was it cookies and sweets before you went to bed? You know, what was the reward, you know, for being a behaved child?
I have one question, because you mentioned that emotions carry information for us. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What kind of information do you think they carry? Is it about how we respond to our environment? Can we trust this information that they give us? How do we explore? When do we trust our emotions? When do we not trust our emotions?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Okay, when do we trust them? When do we not trust them? Wow, what an amazingly deep question that is. Okay, so I would say in the beginning of your journey into your emotional body, you have to learn to trust them. Okay. And then as you start to develop some emotional maturity, then you can start to discriminate between those emotions that are really damaging for yourself and for others. But I don't think you can go to the discriminatory phase without first being in the accepting phase. I think most of us have had such an early upbringing and environment of like being told that what we felt was wrong and being put into a situation where we had to conform to a certain family viewpoint or a certain, you know, we could say a family archetype. You know, so many of us had that in our background that I think the first step is to totally accept what you feel, totally accept, you know, and
Yes.
no matter what it is. Okay. I don't think it's a good idea to start discriminating in the beginning. Like most of us didn't have that acceptance of the emotional body. But certainly as you mature, you learn, for example, that impatience is never a great thing, you know. That's one thing you will learn, you know, that impatience with the emotional body, it never serves you or anyone else. Okay. But to get to
So,
that place where you can be patient with your own emotional body takes a lot of acceptance. So does that make sense in the order that we should apply this?
yes, I suppose first we start by trusting our emotions, and then we start accepting, we start learning our lessons by having the experiences with our emotions. I can see this. I had another question. Just a second. I had another question about can emotions actually hurt us? Because they come from inside of us, they come from life. So the whole concept of emotion can hurt us. It's a little bit worth of contemplation, because it's an energy that suddenly moves in us. Isn't it what hurt us, our resistance to it, that we can constrict ourselves towards it, that is hurting us, or the emotion itself? This is a contemplation for me, because I can definitely see sometimes if I overindulge in some in some emotions. For example, if I cry all day, for example, I can be very exhausted and I can feel this is a draining of my energy. So overindulging in emotions, I can see can be damaging, but the emotion itself, can it really hurt us?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And my answer would be, it's exactly as what you said. It's the resistance to them that is painful, you know. that is painful. It's the wishing that they weren't there that is painful. And again, this takes a little bit of maturity to see this, because most of us, what we do is we project out onto the external world. And if the external world is not, and again, this comes down to our early environment of what we consider nurturing, okay? So we're going to go into this in the webinar at the weekend because it's a deep subject, but so many of us, we were conditioned by our early family life about what we expected life to give us, that we perceived or we were taught was nurturing. This is nurturing, okay? So you could be brought up in a family where being beaten with a belt every day is some form of nurturing. That's the message you get from that, even though it doesn't feel nurturing. There are many people that had that sort of environment that continue to beat their kids because they were beaten, because that was the nurturing environment that they were brought up in, right? So this is a very deep question. So this idea that emotions can hurt us, no, it's our resistance to them that hurts. Yeah, that is very painful. I went through that recently myself, where I had part of preparing for this webinar was to ask myself, what's my worst nightmare at the emotional level? That was one of my contemplations. Like, what's the worst feeling for me to experience in my life? I really wanted to go deep into that and to ask myself what that question was. And of course, I asked that question and life showed me what that was, And for me, it was a sense of not having any meaninglessness. It was my deepest fear and my deepest emotional fear, I would say, is to feel that sense of not meaning anything, very deep, and I lived it for 3 or 4 days, and I was literally living my resistance to it, not the feeling to it, because I actually had a breakthrough this morning where I just allowed it. Okay, let it in, just let that feeling in. And as soon as I let it in, as soon as I surrendered to it, the pain around it went away. The feeling didn't. The feeling is still there. It's still very raw inside of me, but the pain associated with it, the resistance associated with it, disappeared, I would say. Yeah. So again, one of those keynotes of acceptance, accepting what we feel, is very important. Yeah.
Yes, and why do you think this resistance shows up in our lives with our emotions?
Because it's where we learn. It's like I said, it's the cutting edge of our evolution. It's like that's where we learn the most. It's like when we learn to receive the wisdom. There's wisdom in all of our feelings, all of our unconscious feelings. Like, we have to see that feelings, our emotional body is really an expression of the soul. That's how the soul communicates, is through the feeling body. It's through the feeling body.
I believe everyone that is here and is watching would love to connect with their soul more. At least I want to connect with my soul more. But my question was, where does this resistance come to feeling these feelings? Is it from a wounding in our childhood? Is it from some fear that we're not going to be accepted? What do you think is the main?
All of those. It primarily comes. It comes from our early childhood environment, but it also comes from soul memories as well. So oftentimes we're born into a family where we're recreating like soul memories of previous lives and other experiences like this. And so, but our early family life is a good representation of like where the soul has been journeying for a long time. So this is the reason why we choose the families that we do, is because our soul has a much deeper agenda for us to actually evolve beyond these painful experiences of our early life, So this is why the families we're born into are really perfect for us, and it takes a lot of maturity to really see that. At some stage, you really see it, as you evolve on this journey, you realize that your family was perfect, that they were perfect for your soul's evolution. But it takes time to get to that place. So I would never say that to someone who's been really traumatized in their early life, say they had something really horrific happen to them from their parental experience. I would never say, oh, it's perfect. Of course, that's not, I would just validate their feelings and so forth. But what I will say for sure is as that soul evolves and as they start to embrace all of those challenges of that life, they will get to a place. They will get to a place where they see that it was perfect for them, you know, but that sometimes takes a little bit of time.
Yes, thank you for sharing. So it seems like all of us have a very unique emotional body with very unique way of processing our emotions. And we have beautiful systems that can be like a mirror for us, like the gene keys and the Venus sequence that show our emotional patterns. We have some information in astrology and other places. The question that we received from Ulrike was, how do we change our habits with our emotions, though if they are so ingrained? What would you answer to him?
Yeah, I think you're going to learn that on the webinar coming up this weekend. But in a nutshell, I would say it's bringing awareness to it. Number one, you have to bring awareness to the patterns. You have to be aware of them first, okay? And you have to see them as habitual responses. You know, you have to see they are a habit. You know, when this happens in the external world, or when I have this certain thought, my habit is to do this. Okay, so that's the first step. You have to become aware of your habit. You have to question your habits. Like when this happens, I do this, right? So that's the first step, awareness. Without the awareness, nothing can change. Then, second step is to start to make a connection back in time to your early family life, to where these habits originated from. Again, I'll be taking people through a process on the course this coming weekend on how to do that. But you have to go back in time and see where these habits originated from. If you look up the gene key and the line on the moon, you can really get a lot of insight into your early environment, you know. And we'll be doing that as well, the personality moon gene key and the line. It shows a lot of where your habits are coming from and your fears that you were brought up with, you know. So a lot of times our habits, I would say most of our habits that we learned at a very young age were to protect us in some way. They were to protect us, okay? And they were, because when we're young, we have two primary needs. We have the need to be authentic, and we have the need to survive. These are the two primary needs of young children. And when we're young, the need to be authentic always takes second place to the need to survive. So that's another thing that you can look at is like, where did I give up my authentic expression so that I could survive? And this is the number one issue that goes on in most relationships, by the way. Is that in the beginning, we have a honeymoon period where we're each providing the emotional needs that we didn't get from our parents. We're each providing that. That's what happens when we fall in love. We actually fall in love with the unconsciousness inside of us that wanted the perfect parent. That's, I mean, most psychologists will agree with me on that definition of how we fall in love. And the relationships that are long lasting are the ones that actually untie those projections of what the needs are. And so again, the gene keys can be an incredibly useful tool for seeing that, for seeing the patterns, for actually seeing what those patterns are. But then to actually change it, that really takes some courage. It really takes some stepping into the unknown. It really takes a lot of trust. Like you have to trust that if you change the habit, that something new and better is going to show up, you know. So that's a leap of faith, you know. So again, we'll be covering that in the workshop as well, how to create that sort of sense of faith in taking that leap, in taking the leap. So it's a great question.
So are you saying that we are not here to change these emotional patterns? We are here to allow, accept, and embrace them. We are here to learn to live them in a new way, to live with them in a new way, and work where comes the space for this emotional alchemy, where we transmute them, where we find the power in them?
Well, because what you'll start to see is when you start to really dive into the emotional body, and especially the emotional habits and the instinctual reactions that we have, what you'll see is a lot of times those emotional reactions, those instincts, yeah, we have to accept them first of all, but also they are an impediment to your soul's growth. This is the important thing to understand. In many ways, these reactions inside of us are like childish. They're because they weren't recognized when we were young. And so what happens is, for many of us, we grow up and we have this persona of like having it all together, but inside we're still an emotional child, you know. And this can be very shocking for people when they come to the Gene Keys or they come to one of my classes in emotional alchemy, is they realize that their child inside, the inner child, is still very young, you know, still very young. So we have to, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we have this inner child that's quite young and has been injured. And we have to nurture it and parent it and allow it to grow up. And the interesting thing is, as we do that, as we heal that inner child is actually the doorway to the soul and to your creative genius. So this is why it's important to honor your emotions, you know. But also it's important at some stage in your development to start to discriminate of what you want to feel, what you truly want to feel, you know. But most people aren't in that place yet. Most people are being habitually kicked around by their emotional body. You know, they're not generating the emotional body from the soul. They're reacting to it in most cases. You know? So it's a big work. It's not a simple work. You know, it's a deep work. You know, and this is why I developed OFT, because I saw that most talk therapy doesn't approach the body in the right way. You know, it's so you can understand everything that happened, but the inner child inside is still suffering, you know. So mentally we understand, but the inner child has not been touched. And that's why OFT was developed, because of that. And in a way, it's most of my work is about healing the emotional body.
Yes, thank you. OFT really helps to dive inside and feel our emotions and have space for our emotions, and creates an opportunity to validate what we are feeling. So many times emotions create, we are not connected with our emotions many times. We feel physical pains and physical symptoms, and many times it appears they are connected with some emotional charge deeply suppressed in the body. What do we do when we are not in touch with our emotions? How can we be more in touch with our emotions, to those of us who can not feel their emotions so
Yeah,
much?
you've got to be curious. Number one, you've got to be curious. Like when you have some type of emotional reaction, you it's fine, you know, you allow yourself to have it. Most times it happens, you know, we get unconscious. We suddenly, you know, our partner says something or something happens in life and we have a reaction, we have an emotional reaction. It's usually at those times, it's good not to be self-critical or self-analytical at that time. It's best to wait till later in the day, maybe you're in the evening, and you review your life, you review your day, and you go, okay, what happened in that moment? You look back and you go, what happened? What went through my mind? What was I feeling? What was the person, if it was a person who triggered it, what were they saying? What did it remind me of? You know, you ask questions like, what did that remind me of? How often have I felt that feeling before? That's a great question. Like how many, because you'll see that a lot of times your emotional reactions, they keep repeating, you know, they keep repeating. They're not always different. They're a repeating scenario, you know? And so you want to get curious with them. You want to be patient with them. You want to be gentle with them. And that takes time to develop that skill. You know, we have to slow down enough to really feel them as well. We have to slow down, you know, and just notice what we're feeling, you know. Slowing down is really, really important. So breathing, you know, is another key that you can use, you know. If you can breathe in the middle of an emotional fight with someone, you'll very quickly come back to your center and you'll realize what's going on. Notice when you're emotionally upset with your partner or with life or whatever, your breathing stops. That's always happens. You know, you're not conscious of your breath. You're not conscious of being an individual. You know, so there are many ways to do it. You know, like I teach a lot of them in you know, the Wujigong training, the inner alchemy training, about slowing down and getting more in touch with the body. Getting in touch with the body is paramount. It's absolutely paramount, you know.
So yes, indeed, you know, and many times these suppressed emotions, they are there, and I like this idea to be curious, to just where there are signs of us feeling. And the other opposite is when we are too reactive and emotions take hold of us and we are too easy expressing our feelings, which can create a lot of problems and troubles in our relationships.
Yeah.
What do we do if we are really of this reactive type, where we cannot hold our emotions? They always take hold of us and express, and then many times we blame ourselves or we feel ashamed of how we behaved.
Right.
Is
Well,
it
you're
again
mostly
the same?
you're mostly describing about 98% of humanity, right? You know, that's, I mean,
Yes,
that's how,
this is.
it's very obvious to me that, you know, we're so evolved intellectually, you know, and scientifically and spiritually and conceptually. We're incredibly evolved, you know, but when it comes to the emotional body, I think most of us are very reactive, you know. So the only answer really is to want to go beyond that, you know, to want to evolve, I would say, to want to get to a place where that's not running you anymore. And that's very possible, I think, with awareness, with patience, with gentleness, with forgiveness, like recognizing that you have a little child inside who's terrified, you know, who's terrified of life, you know.
So you should say we can make dramas and conflicts without judging ourselves afterwards. We can just express our emotions and try to catch.
I mean, we're going to judge ourselves. I mean, that's one of the things that we learned from our family, you know, is that we were judged for having certain feelings. So we will judge ourselves, you know, especially when we don't live up to a standard that we have been put on us, or a standard that we have from the inside, you know, there will be some judgment there. You know, that's no doubt about that. There'll be guilt as well. There's possibly some shame, you know, these are what I call secondary reactions to the emotional body. And this is what makes things so complex, is that first we have the pure feeling, the authentic feeling in the moment, usually. And then we have the secondary mental, emotional, conceptual reaction to that primary feeling. So for a lot of people, it's just getting back in touch with the primary feeling, which is what OFT is about, actually. You know, it's very difficult to do it in the beginning on your own without some type of meditation practice, some type of awareness practice, some type of breath practice, you know. So if you are overly emotional, the first thing I would recommend is some type of meditation practice, some type of breath awareness practice, some type of body awareness practice, so that you can start to come into the present moment more. That would be my first, you know, number one recommendation for anyone who feels that the emotions are overwhelming them. Some type of awareness practice, meditation practice, body awareness, breath awareness, something that will allow them to become more present with themselves. That's primary.
Yes, many times there is this. Many times we try, or I have tried, to get rid of certain emotions, you know, as if I hit the pillow or do something like this, the emotion will go out and will never come back again. but this continues. So you recommend to have a constant practice that makes us more aware and more that expands our awareness, so we are able to hold space for these emotions and be with them.
Be
Okay.
curious. Be curious about them. Ask questions like, how many times have I experienced this before? What sort of triggers make this happen? Like, was this something I learned in my childhood? You know, ask lots of questions. It's really important. You see, in 5-element theory, there's a wonderful reflection of this. It's the wood element. The wood element is clear, rational thinking, you know, and when we have clear, rational thinking, it can actually stimulate our intuition, number one. And number two, it can help us dissolve anxiety about our feelings. Okay, so clear, rational thinking is a great gift, you know, for when it comes to the emotional body. It seems strange because the emotional body doesn't live in the rational world, but at the same time, when we like, so for example, if you're really afraid, like for example, if you're really afraid that you know, you lost your job and there's no money coming in, you know, and so what can trigger the feelings you can have in that moment is, oh, I'm going to die, I'm not going to be able to survive, you know. These are the feelings that can come up. Now you can use clear, rational thinking in that moment to say, well, my mother would put me up, or you know, my brother would take care of me. You know, you could actually start applying it, and that would calm your anxiety down, you know, just by having those clear, rational thoughts, right? So there are many approaches to this, but I would say the number one, the most important, is curiosity. It's the most a very unusual quality, but I think it's the most important, to become curious. You know, instead of like blaming yourself, instead of saying, oh, there's something wrong with me, just be curious. Like, okay, just change that to curiosity. When did this happen before? How many times have I felt this before? Where is the origin of this? When was the first time I felt this? You know, these are all fantastic questions, you know.
I think you are guiding us to the art of contemplation. Yeah, to contemplate something and be with it and look at it from different sides and feel it and allow it to be in our life. Many times what happens is that we have a specific feeling in one moment, specific emotional state, and our partner has a different emotional state.
Right, right.
Many times, especially with the negative feelings, I expect my partner to support me through the negative state.
Right.
Many times this may not happen, or I'm in a fun mood and my partner not in so nice. It's just an example. Usually it's not the case, but it's just an example. So how come that many times emotions um, divide us in some way? Like we have our own emotional world and we are seems like to be alone in it. And where is the unity? How can we get into unity in our couples with the different emotions that we have? How can we support our partner through and ourselves and have respect for the different emotions? Do you have some experience from about this?
Yes, yes, I have a lot of experience. I've been in
Yes.
a lot of relationships in my years. So, yeah, I mean, it comes down to this whole idea of the expectations we carry that our love partners need to provide all of our needs. I mean, this comes back to our early childhood where our parents did their best to provide all of our needs. When we get older, of course, we start providing for our own needs, but still inside, that child can expect our partner to provide a need. So, you know, what I've noticed in my own relationships is the times I get triggered, I have an expectation that they need to fulfill some type of need in me. And that's what triggers me, you know. So again, it comes back to expectations, the expectations we have of how we expect to be nurtured, you know. So I want to bring in here something important, because I want to make this practical for people that may not attend the webinar but want to get some insights. So one of the things you can look at from the evolutionary point of view is just looking at the position of the moon, where your moon was when you were born, you know. So in my case, it's Scorpio. My moon was in Scorpio. I think Alita's, yours is in Pisces. I asked you, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if Elisa doesn't mind, I'm going to do a little thing on her moon, right? So she's born with the moon in Pisces. The moon, remember, in astrology, it represents your past. It's almost like it represents the conditioning that you brought in with you into this dimension. Whereas the sun is representing your future potential. It's like the soul's potential. That's what the sun represents. It represents pure consciousness, pure awareness, pure responsivity. It's pure consciousness, pure awareness. Whereas the moon is related to the past, it's related to habitual response, it's related to nurturing, it's related to many things of the past, basically. Okay, so we can say that if you have the moon in Pisces, then you have inside of you, you have the memory from your early childhood, but also from soul memories of your boundaries being very diffused. Pisces is the sign that is very much associated with universal consciousness. And so what I would suggest to you is, Nalitza, is your evolution is towards the Virgo opposite point of that moon. And any of you can look at this and really look clearly. So what is the Virgo evolutionary point? It's opposite of Pisces. So that's an evolutionary direction. So for Elitza, if she starts to develop within herself more discrimination, that's one of the great qualities of Virgo, discrimination. And knowing when to commit her energy, when not to commit it, when to be with herself, when to be with others, developing boundaries, developing a sense of serving herself, she's going to evolve that Pisces moon. Okay, can you recognize that journey of evolution for you, Elitza? Have you seen that journey for you, that before everyone was connected, and you could sometimes it was difficult for you to see what was yours and what was someone else's? Do you recognize that?
Yes, I definitely recognize this this growth in me from what you describe as moon in Pisces towards moon in Virgo.
That's right.
But I also feel it's something that happens naturally as we learn how to be with our emotions, right? Even if we don't know where is our moon, and even if we don't know astrology, because maybe some of us don't know about astrology, it's not needed for us to know astrology to evolve emotionally, right?
Well, let's really go deep. What is the gene keys? The gene keys is astrology. Okay, it's the imprinting of the planets at the time of your birth. Okay, so that's like saying the gene keys is not useful. It's useful, right?
Yes, it's useful, but I was just coming from the perspective of that this is something that is happening naturally as we work with our emotions and feelings in our own life, and then gene keys and astrology acts like a confirmation or also guidance, but it's not like it's gonna save me if I know that my moon is in Virgo or that my gene keys. This is not gonna do the job for me, right?
That's not going to
So
do the job.
this is what I was trying to
I understand.
bring
I
the
understand.
attention to.
Okay, so we're let's clarify that. Yeah, it's the awareness that you bring to it. So the great gift of something like astrology or gene keys, if it's used in the right way, is awareness. Is that it brings awareness to the patterns, right?
Yes.
And so you can start to see these patterns, what they are, right? So you can go deeper. Like we can look at your moon. I can look at my moon in the gene keys profile and look at that and see and say, oh, so I have the moon in Scorpio, but it's in the position of the gene key of totality, which is the gene key of totality, but the shadow is purposelessness. And then I have a third line there. So that tells me a lot about my early environment, about like what sort of fears and what sort of expectations and what sort of environment I was brought into, And I remember, when I was young, when I was the firstborn, number one, before I was born, my mother had 7 miscarriages. So you can imagine the fear that when I was in her womb and the joy of when I came out, So that's number one. That's a huge, imprinting on my soul, I would say, right? And there was a totality to my mother that she wouldn't give up. You know, in the end, she sewed herself up so as not to lose me. You know, it was a totality in her focus. I'm going to have this boy, you know. Okay. And so I was brought into this environment, but I was also very aware in my early environment, again, through contemplating, that my mother had these huge fears about the future, about survival, because my father was in the Navy, he was away, he wasn't there to take care of my mother. So my mother was working. She was very total in that respect, you know, incredibly total, but she had all this fear, you know. So, you know, I learned a lot when I understood the gene key of my birth moon, you know, and I understood a little bit more about my life, you know. And we've discussed yours already. Yeah.
Yes. So. Can we say that this, what we will also discover, what we will contemplate during the weekend, can we say that this is the root of a pattern that is in our life, that is the most painful and hard for us, and the most deep, maybe on some level?
I wouldn't say it was the most. I wouldn't say it's the most deep. What I would say is it's the imprinting we received as a young child of how we expected life to be. Okay, so like I'll give you my example. Okay, so for me, how I expect life to be for me is for it to be a total incredible experience, to have this amazing experience of life. The worst fear for me in my life is to feel that I live my life without fully living. You know, that's the worst fear for me. So it's the opposite. It's the shadow of that totality gene key, you know. So I can see how that was something very instrumental in bringing me up, you know. And so what I think it does, this personality moon, is it shows you how you expect life to treat you, how you expect life to nurture you. And of course, there's a lot of disappointment in that, because how we were raised as a child was at a personal level, and then how we experience life is at the impersonal level. So there's a huge synapse that goes on that many people don't realize, is that the greater world is not your family. I mean, it is at the biggest consciousness level, but from the child's point of view, what I'm trying to say is that the greater world is not your early home environment. Does that make sense to you, Alita? Do you understand what I'm trying to say there?
I'm so excited about this design moon, you know, because and I'm so grateful for your discovery and you pointing us out to this specific place, which we can see in our profiles, because for me, this gene key is about honoring. And I can, with the heart, with my hand on my heart, just say, honoring and dishonoring is the biggest topic for me, is the 22nd gene key, is the biggest topic for me that draws my emotions and my emotional reactions, my emotional sadness, my emotional anger, whatever emotion somehow seems to come from this topic, which comes from this design moon. It's very deep. Whenever I see dishonoring of something, even somebody cutting a tree, somebody hurting an animal, somebody being dishonoring towards me or towards any other person, even in the shop, even in somewhere else. And it's also one of my biggest fears, you know, I'm going to be dishonored in some way. Right. So I think I can feel this is something really big that I can unravel and discover more about. I'm still curious about, I now know, you know, just by honoring this pattern and knowing this pattern, it makes my life much more, somehow settles me and relax me more within who I am. Just knowing that this is a part of me that I come here to work with and be with and experience this pain of this specific expression of life. So maybe we are all deeply touched through our emotions about something, because some of the emotions, they really bring us pain, you know, the deep emotional pain. But this pain is also the door to our heart. Yes, we can, if we go through this emotional turmoil in a way that is very somehow honest and being with it, it actually opens our heart at one point.
That's
We
right.
actually go beyond.
That's
And,
right.
and it's through the emotion, through the pain, that we get there. So getting to know these emotional patterns, maybe it's a beautiful gift for us. Yeah, getting to know them, being with them, taking responsibility for them, and finally managing to pierce them. But not through, I'm going to do something with them, but to really yielding in them and being with them, that some beautiful transformation happens, right? We have one question that is, just let me check it. And maybe we can invite people if they have questions to ask. So what about if the moon is in Aquarius and the sun is in Libra? What Liliana has to learn? What is more
Okay.
important?
Okay. So
She's grateful. Yeah.
so just look at the moon, because the sun will automatically blossom when we transmute our patterns, when we transmute our habitual responses. Okay, that's number one. By working with our habitual responses, we actually automatically let the sun illuminate us. Okay, so just very simply, you have an Aquarian moon. It means you've spent many lifetimes probably, and where it was important for you to go along with a group. Part of you is really motivated by, thinking about higher consciousness. The Aquarian archetype is like about the big human family. So friendship would be a very important thing for you. That you would fight for your friends. You would emotionally feel very, very motivated by having a diverse range of friends and allowing people to speak and say whatever they felt was important to them. Freedom would be an important thing for you at the emotional level, right? This idea of being free to be an individual, to speak up, and to express, right, and all of these things. But it also could make you, the habitual response of the moon in Aquarius could be very rigid. It could be very stubborn in many ways in standing up for other people's freedoms and for your own freedom. And the energy that you're moving towards is that Leo energy, which is not so much about groups and about the individual's freedom in the group, but about unique self-expression. So I would say part of your journey, Liliana, is been towards more creative actualization. So anything that actually brings you more to being a creator and actualizing just for yourself, not for the group, but for yourself, would be a step in the right direction for you evolutionary. So you can go very deep into this. And this is why the moon is so important, because it's the moon where we grow. It's when we change the habitual reactions to things, we realize that then we start to move towards our evolution. Yeah. I mean, I go into this very deeply in my private consultations where I do soul readings for people. This is part of my skill, is really seeing what the soul is wanting to progress towards, and so I do a lot of that work, and it's been very helpful for many people when people consult with me privately in that work, because I clarify in one session. I can clarify where the soul's trying to move towards, and it's very helpful. Yeah.
Yes, definitely, Andrew, is very helpful, the work that you are doing in the world. And one of the things that I've seen with you through the years that I'm blessed to know you, is your ability to be with people's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Your ability to validate people's emotions, recognize people's emotions, not forget that there is emotional charge when you are in a group of people that try to resolve an issue just through intellectualization. So you are definitely gifted into the emotional world and how to deal with emotions. So I'm very grateful that we're going to experience this weekend together with you and learn more about your wisdom, how to be with our emotions and what's the wisdom in our emotions.
Yeah,
So
thanks,
I want
Elisa.
to thank you for this conversation, and I want to invite us to wrap up. If there is something that you can say, like final words, it would be
Yeah,
great.
I guess the final words I just want to finish that last thought about, please remember everyone that the world is not your family from the point of view of the inner child inside of you. So what do I mean by this? I mean that we were all brought up in an individual family and we all had these expectations of what it meant to be loved and nurtured. And then when we get out into the world, it's a bit of a shock because the world doesn't mirror back to us what we expected from our family upbringing. Okay, it doesn't mirror back because the world is impersonal, whereas our early upbringing was very personal. And this is one of the most important things to understand in your own evolution is that when you meet the world is going to love you, but it's going to love you in a way that's very impersonal. That you won't, unless you have awareness, you're not going to understand it. You're going to take everything personally and you're going to filter it through your childhood and you're just going to end up in a loop. But when you realize that the world actually deeply loves you, it loves you much more even than your birth parents loved you. You know, the love that your parents had for you is quite small compared to the way life loves each one of us. Because life loves each one of us because we're each part of life. So that's why, it's important to accept your feelings because they're coming from life. They're actually coming from within us. And they're tools to help us get clarity. So again, my final words really are, number one, recognize that the early environment you were brought up in is not going to be mirrored in the outer world. Okay. Especially your expectations about it. It won't be mirrored. It will be the opposite, actually, because life wants you to mature and get more free. The second thing is not to judge yourself, is to really accept that there's a unique lesson for each one of us on the emotional level. And that is perhaps one of the hardest things for us to recognize is that all of our feelings, all of our are actually divine and actually perfect for our evolution. So that's what I wish for everyone who attends next weekend's workshop, that they will get that understanding. And it's my wish for all of you, listening to this, that you bring more of that gentleness, patience, and acceptance to your own emotional body. So I want to thank Elisa for this. Thank you very much for being my muse and for asking me some interesting questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We have this, what you've shared at the last is so, so beautiful because I feel this is one of the biggest shocks when we start being crushed by life sometimes, when we grow up and suddenly because when we are babies, we are so held, so most of us, maybe not everyone, but we feel very connected to the life force inside of us. And we are in a bliss, we are in a beautiful, supportive state, everything is possible for us. And then life comes on the outside and in a way crushes us in some ways. And this is where the confusion comes with our emotions, I feel, at least for me. Sorry, I'm speaking from a week. This is a pattern that I have also. I have this experience, at one point in my life, I started feeling that life is crushing me in some ways or showing me, for example, when somebody that I don't know on the street and he will act not nice towards me. And it will raise so many feelings and so much questions, but why? What have I done? What is wrong with me? So this emotional journey, it's really, really interesting.
It's
And
so interesting.
I think that nowadays we are more and more open to explore our emotions with the mutation of the solar plexus. People are feeling more. We are okay. I am more and more, and I see it around me, interested in the emotional realm. So any contemplation is, I think, very valuable. And I'm grateful that we will have this opportunity with you to have a weekend together where we can go deeper and look at our emotions.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important to say that it's not just me. I mean, you guys are going to be helping and doing a little bit of teaching as well, right? So.
Yes, there will be people from Jinkies, Bulgaria that will be sharing a little of their experience, of our experience. And we have some late questions that arrived.
Oh, okay. I
Do
can
we
answer
have a
them. It's
moment?
okay. Yeah.
Okay. Because Andrea, I was trying to be precise on an hour, you know.
It's okay. It's okay.
So we have a question from Yulita about the moon in Cancer.
Yeah.
Can you say something about the moon in Cancer?
So this is the classic moving from being an emotional child to being an adult. Capricorn represents the 10th house. It represents the highest level we can achieve socially. You know, it rules the 10th house, whereas the 4th house, the Cancer house, is ruled by the moon. It represents our past. So when you have a Cancer moon, it means that you've had many, many lifetimes of where your childhood self, your emotional childhood self was nurtured by the outside. And now life is saying for you to evolve, you have to move towards more autonomy and more nurturing yourself rather than expecting other people to nurture you. And so whenever you have a moon in Cancer, there's an evolutionary need there to become more self-sufficient, to become emotionally self-sufficient. You know, that's true for all of us, by the way. You know, we all have to learn that lesson to become more emotionally self-sufficient. Doesn't mean we become cold or anything like that. We still feel everything inside, but we honor what we feel, you know. So that's a maturity rather than expecting the world to or others to nurture us, you know. So that's the evolutionary intent of the moon in Cancer, which is really what I'm talking about on this class. So, you know, sounds like it'll be a good class for you.
Yes, and there is one more question from Svetlina. I hope I can read it properly, which is about what about if in the Vedic, if is Scorpio and Sagittarius in Western astrology. Moon in Vedic, Scorpio, and Sagittarius in Western astrology.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's, I think you have to follow your own intuition with that. That's, you know, you're going to have to really test it out, you know. You know, I'm not so familiar with Vedic astrology, so I've never had a chance to really test it out.
What about Sagittarius, which is in the Western? Oh, yeah, not in Western? Yeah.
She's saying which one should I take? I think that was the question. And so
what about Moon? Svetlana, can you clarify your question? Maybe we can ask her to clarify.
Yeah. I think she's asking which moon do I take? Do I take the Vedic one or take the Western one? And for me, I can't answer that question. That's up to you and your own intuition.
I think she's just wanting to have some information about her moon, but what I'm not clear is where her moon is. So Svetlana, can you let us know what's...
Well, I can address it. She said the Vedic was in Scorpio and the Western was in Sagittarius. So I'm going to go with the Sagittarian. So Sagittarius moon is really, you know, a soul that has been developing their own philosophy, their own belief about life. You know, they're what you would call like truth. You know, like the moon if you have the moon in Sagittarius, there's a real tendency and there can be a stubbornness around truth, you know, like this is the truth, you know, this is the habit that the Sagittarius moon has. This is the truth and only this is the truth. The evolution is towards Gemini, which is to see that truth is relative, that there are many different forms of truth and to take in different levels of other people's experience of truth rather than being so attached to your own definition of truth. That's the evolutionary direction for someone with the moon in Sagittarius. It doesn't mean that you can't, you know, love your own truth. It's just that you're open to other people's truths as well, because truth is ultimately beyond any type of belief, you know. So.
Okay, Andrew, there is another question about how important is to know the precise hour and minute of birth when we speak about the moon, probably. But the question is how important is to know the precise hour and minute of birth.
Yeah, it's quite important. I mean, you can get it down pretty accurately with a good astrologer. Like I'm pretty good at doing that for people, like figuring out where they really are. There are certain things in astrology that are quite easy to figure out, like the ascendant. You know, the ascendant is pretty easy to see in people, you know, if you have a lot of experience in astrology. And oftentimes, if you really push your parents, you know, you won't get a time, but you will get, it was in the morning or it was in the evening and things like that. And so you can hone in. There's lots of things you can do to hone in on that. So I just recommend you, you know, get in touch with a good astrologer who can do that for you. It's called a rectification of the birth time. And it's very possible to do that. So, yeah, but it's worth experimenting.
Yes, and can you also spend some time with answering Tanya? What about the moon in Leo? You spoke a little bit about the opposite, but can you speak about Leo moving towards Aquarius?
Well, it's obvious, right? In Leo, it's very self-centered. It's very me. You know, Leo is the sun sign, so it's all about me. It's all about creative self-expression. The evolution is more towards this idea that my creative self-expression can actually serve a much greater collective good. And so if you're evolving with your moon in Leo, you take your own unique creativity and you surrender it to a much bigger cause, something like that. That's the evolutionary direction for a moon in Leo person. They stop becoming so self-centered and they use their creativity and their uniqueness to serve a greater good, to serve an Aquarian ideal. It's very easy to figure this out once you understand the archetypes. It's very, very easy. Very easy.
Are you sure that just understanding them cook the rice?
Well, it gives you a direction, which is what we
yes.
need. It gives you a direction, you know. So the first place is in the habits. We have to unwind the habits. We have to see what our habitual responses to life. And we have to be curious enough to want to change those habits to something that's more in alignment with our evolution, you know. So,
yes,
and this is why I think this course is going to be great for everyone, because it will really inspire people. Because I teach a lot of ways to change. You know, I teach Wu Qigong, I teach OFT, I teach ways to transmute and evolve. But the habits, that's something that everyone has to dive into and see them clearly for what they are.
Yes, I want to say that I'm very grateful for all these directions that we are given by life, by teachers like you, like Richard, like all the teachers, and I've had amazing teachers in my life. And I want to invite also personally all the people that are drawn to spend some time with us, contemplating together this very deep and personal subject of emotions. You're all welcome. And it's definitely a topic worth contemplating, because emotions can make our life so beautiful and can crush it down somehow, which is so interesting. And my last final question: how would you describe emotional maturity? What is to be emotionally mature? How does it represent in the world? What will it look like if someone is emotionally matured? How would you describe such a person?
That they feel everything, but they're not identified with what they feel.
So they become friends with their emotions.
Yeah, and at the same time, they're not identified with them at all. They recognize them. They're just like weather. You know, thoughts and feelings are like the weather. They're not our identity. Our identity is the sun that never changes. It's our consciousness. So the biggest mistake people make is they identify too much with what they feel or think. And they say, that's who I am. But that's not who they are. They are the sun. They are that which never changes. So emotional maturity goes through stages. First, you have to learn how to accept the emotional body. Then 2, you learn how to discriminate and realize that you are more than your emotions. You're more than your thoughts. You know, there's something deeper, which is your consciousness.
You're the observer, yeah.
You're the observer, exactly. But you use the emotions. You use the emotions to get back to that place by loving them. You know, because these emotions, they're like little shadows around the pure consciousness of who we are. You know, they really are in a way, they're the limitation to who we are. In a way, they actually stop us really feeling the vastness of who we are, you know. So they're a learning opportunity, but they're also a way that holds us back on some level as well, you know. They're like the tension inside of us, you know, of where they're sort of the tension between where we know we can go and what we think is in the way. That's my best definition of it.
And also maybe they are serving our awareness, because if there is nothing moving, if there is no emotion, we don't have something to contemplate and come to the now. You know, we forget our body many times, and then the emotion. So I like that.
Well, I would say this.
Yes.
There is something much deeper than the emotions that are driving us, and that's what we call in Taoists the virtues, the soul qualities.
Yes.
So we all have love inside of us. We all have kindness. We all have generosity. We have these virtues inside of us that are deeper than the emotions. So that's
Yes,
one of the
definitely.
gifts. That's one of the gifts that comes out as we embrace the shadows, as we embrace these more challenging experiences. Then what comes out is our truth, is our soul qualities, you know.
So as we learn to dance with our emotions and embrace our emotions, we are actually going deeper with our emotions, through our emotions, to a more deeper place where something that is not so much changing starts
That's right.
shining.
That's right. Something that's consistent starts to actually rise up inside each one of us. We can say the soul qualities, you know, and those are indestructible. You know, those are not changing. They're there constantly.
So can we say that the power of our emotions is to go back to our soul together with them, or through
Absolutely.
them,
Absolutely.
and to
Absolutely.
discover who we are
Exactly.
on a
Exactly.
deeper level?
Exactly.
And they are not something we should be afraid of, or
No.
that are here to make our life miserable, or, you know, they are very powerful. They infuse our life with feeling, with atmosphere. And when we learn to somehow be with them, maybe our life will become much more deep and interesting. So I'm so much looking forward to hear what you have to share with us in the weekend. I
Okay.
always enjoy to spend time listening to you
Okay.
teaching and holding space. So hope
Great. I'm looking
you
forward to it as
will
well.
join us.
Yeah. So bye everyone on Facebook. We went over longer than the hour, but hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll see you all soon.
See you all.
Bye.
Bye.